Hello,
Hi, welcome.
welcome. I'm going to introduce you to tonight, okay?
Fantastic, Mark. We were just kind of
Okay,
going over a few things.
okay,
Mark,
good.
do you know Brittany at all?
I don't know Brittany. Hi, Brittany.
Don't think we've met. Hi, Mark.
Hi,
Nice
how
to
are
meet
you?
you.
Yes.
Good. I'm doing well.
Well, I
Thanks
Mark,
thought
for
I just,
seeing tonight.
yes. So I'm just going to make a few introductory comments, mechanics, and then introduce you to, and then just go from there, right?
yeah. Well, Mark, I hope you get to know Brittany. She's actually my intern and she's fabulous. So I hope you two will
Okay,
have the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better.
okay,
Thank
okay, great. Good evening.
Laura,
evening.
welcome.
No.
Oh,
Still
this
got a few
meeting
minutes.
starts at 6:30, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. We still got a
Okay.
few minutes to go. So we're gonna give people plenty of time to get logged on and to get things going. So how are you this evening?
I'm good. I just want to make sure I wasn't late.
Oh, plenty of time, plenty of time.
Kelly, do we know how many people registered? Were there 12 or?
Full house tonight.
All right, good.
Yeah, yeah. Last few ones of these that we've done, we've had a few no-shows, so we'll give people some time to
Okay,
hop on, and you know, for a little while we'll just decide when we're ready to get started.
okay, that sounds good.
So Laura, I'm Kelly Martinson. I'm a psychologist with the Cleveland VA, and geropsychology is one of my specialties. I work embedded in medical teams. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm Laura Burns. I'm a psychologist and I work in a private practice setting in Lake County in Mentor, Ohio. And I work with a lot of older adults in various situations. Well, hi, Jerome.
Hi, Laura.
Oh,
All of them are at home, in home settings, but have come from hospitals or various other referral sources. But I work with a lot of older adults, so I'm very interested in telehealth with older adults.
Great.
hello, Michael.
Hi there, how's everybody?
Hi, Michael.
Hey,
Hi.
Michael.
And Jerome, welcome. I was just introducing myself. I'm Kelly Martinson. I'll be one of your facilitators this evening. I'm a psychologist with the Cleveland VA, and geropsychology is one of my specialties.
Okay, great. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. What brings you to the forum tonight, Jerome?
Well, my practice is primarily geropsychology, and I have a small group practice here in Cincinnati. We provide psych services in long-term care settings and continuum of care communities, and also do outpatient consultations at our office as well.
Okay, wonderful. Okay.
Plus, I'm getting old. I always say I'm preparing for my own old age. If we don't learn from these folks, then nobody can learn, you know.
I always say, you know, at least we are getting older. It sure beats the alternative.
Yeah.
I see a familiar face. Hi there, Sylvia.
Hey, Brittany.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, doing well. Thanks for tuning in tonight.
Yeah, this will be interesting.
Okay, and welcome Sylvia and Leslie. We were just doing some brief introductions. I'm Kelly Martinson. I'm a psychologist with the Cleveland VA. Geropsychology is one of my specialties, and I'll be one of your facilitators tonight. So if you ladies would like to just briefly introduce yourselves, say a little bit about yourself, you know, while we're waiting for some of our other participants to join.
Go ahead. I'm Sylvia. I am a fourth year student at the clinical psych program at Case Western Reserve University. I was at my practicum at the VA in the outpatient geropsych clinic. So I started to do a little bit of telehealth there, which mostly doing like assessment results and feedback sessions. so that was fun. But now I am at home, as most of you are.
Hey, Sylvia, who's your supervisor?
Jessica Haberman.
Oh, Jessica's a good friend of mine. You're in great hands.
Yes, she's
Fabulous. Welcome,
wonderful.
Sylvia. Okay.
And I'm Leslie McClure. I am the owner of a group practice up in Kent, Ohio, in Portage County. But my personal specialty is geropsychology. I've worked in primary care settings and with the VA for a while and with SUMA health system for a while, but now I'm just in private practice.
Okay. Welcome, Leslie. Is there anything in particular that brings you to the forum this evening?
Just ideas of going forward, weighing the pros and cons of telepsych versus having a vulnerable population back in the office setting.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Excellent questions. Okay. And Crystal, I think you joined after Leslie. Do you want to introduce yourself and maybe say a little bit about what brought you to the forum this evening?
Yes, I'm Crystal Oswald, and I have a private practice in a rural area, and I have a soft spot for gerontology, even though Medicare won't pay for Grandpa's flip phone only. So I need some, I'm just interested in what you have to say.
Okay. So Crystal, it sounds like you're looking specifically for some phone interventions, not necessarily video based.
There's a few that do video.
Okay. Okay, sure. We can cover both tonight. We'll be tailoring everything to what you guys are specifically looking for. This is going to be very heavily Q&A based. So make sure you speak up and make sure we're covering the stuff that you're looking for specifically. Fabulous. Thank you for letting us know. Okay, and Elizabeth, welcome. We're just doing kind of some brief introductions as people are still logging on. Do you want to introduce yourself and say what brought you to the forum tonight?
Yes, I'm Elizabeth James. I'm in Toledo, and I specialize in sleep and sleep disorders. And not surprisingly, I have a number of seniors and super seniors, and it's kind of interesting because for many, it's really hard to get into the office, but they like coming in, and they're not always good implementers. They vary, but my work with them is very behavioral, but it also involves a very psychotherapeutic framework of understanding of what their issues are, and a lot of medical complexities as well. But this is what they did, which is so amazing. Even before I knew I was doing telehealth, they were calling in to cancel their appointments because they knew it wasn't safe to come in. And those that I called back, I said, I'm probably going to do telehealth. And, but there were a number I didn't. And I just know when you call people out of the blue and they get from a number they're not expecting, they get very befuddled, and I don't want to seem like I'm overreaching or soliciting, so to speak. So they want to turn something like this into a social call. Hi, how are you? How are the kids? How's the dog? They're always super interested in my life, which is usually a little more interesting than theirs. And I want to be a good therapist to them, but I don't want to be intrusive or make it just one more thing they feel they have to do, because they get boatloads of recommendations to see different specialists, and they can make going to specialists a part-time job. And so it concerns me about that. And then we have hearing problems, which are a little difficult over the phone. They're not going to be using internet. I know they're going to be phone, going to be hearing issues. And well, I have one who I know phone will be great, but she sees a regular therapist, and I also don't want to, for personal issues, I don't want to interfere with that relationship because I've worked hard to get it in place and return to its regular occurrences. And the facility she's in, I've had to work with them to make sure that she was seen regularly. So I just like to pick up any generic, words of wisdom, things that seem to be working for people.
Sure,
So.
absolutely. All
Oh,
right.
and then there is another thing, and that is how we really can assess mental status over the phone without being off-putting and intrusive, because I know from speaking with patients and then seeing them in the office or my elderly relatives that there can be more confusion and even downright disorientation than you would know from a conversation. So.
Sure. We can cover some of that today. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Well, I have 7 after. So Mark, do you want to get the ball rolling?
Sure, I will. Thanks, Kelly. I'm Mark Dielman. I'm Vice President of the Communication Division of OPA. And just to remind you of a couple details. So if you put your cursor down to the bottom, you notice there's the mute there on the left-hand side. So if you ask a question, make sure you unmute yourself. And then, of course, if you want to, you can mute yourself in the meantime. Also, if you'd prefer, some people will ask questions verbally. There's also the chat box there in the middle of that ribbon. Feel free to use that to type out your questions if you'd prefer. So that gives you another option there. So I wanted to introduce our speakers tonight. We're privileged to have Brittany Carbaugh and Kelly Martinson. Brittany is finishing her PhD at Cleveland State University and focusing on geropsychology with some focus obviously in telehealth. She's being supervised by Kelly Martinson, who's also VA psychologist and works a lot obviously with VA veterans issues, disabilities, telehealth, psychology. So thank you for coming tonight and providing us your expertise and wisdom. So I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Hey, so thank you, Mark. You know, we're very happy to be here. You know, as I said to most of you, I am Kelly Martinson. I'm a psychologist with the Cleveland VA system, and geropsychology is one of my specialties. I work embedded in medical teams, and at the VA, we've been doing telehealth for frankly a while. So when the coronavirus crisis hit, fortunately, it was a little bit easier for us to bring all of our services online. So it was a little bit easier of a transition. And so one of the things that we've been able to do is to frankly lend our services to some of our colleagues, you guys. So we're here tonight to lend a hand and talk about some of the things that are a little bit easier with telehealth, some of the things that are a little bit harder with telehealth. And I have my amazing intern who I work very closely with, Ms. Brittany Carbaugh. And so what we'd like to do is really focus on the Q&A. We want to get down into the questions that are most important to you. So I'd really like this to be highly interactive, not a more of a lecture thing. That's not totally helpful. And so we can do that through a couple of different things. We can use the chat box. If you move your cursor down to the bottom middle area and click on the chat feature, you can type a question into the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and verbally ask a question and we can interact that way. So does anybody have any questions right off the bat to get us rolling?
I do, if no one else does.
Sure. Leslie, what's the question?
So for our senior population at my practice, much fewer of them decided to do telehealth than our younger population. And I wonder how not just the clinicians, but the administrative staff might talk to the senior population about giving it a try.
Sure, absolutely. So I can't exactly speak to what our administrative staff has been saying to at least our veterans at VA over the phone. I'm not, you know, sitting at their desks coaching them on what to say, but I can tell you what I've been saying. I've been personally doing a lot more outreach to the older veterans that I have on my panel. I do a lot more check-ins and follow-ups and, you know, Mr. So-and-so, I haven't heard from you in a little while. I'm just calling in and checking in with people. How are you doing? And you're right. A lot of them are less likely to engage. They do I found the same thing, that a lot of them do prefer the face-to-face contact in the office. And some of them, it does require a lot more coaching. And so some of the things that I've said to engage is, how about just a phone call to check in every now and again? I'm calling lots of different people. Would it be okay if I called you? And starting that bridge with telephone support. And then as we talk about it, well, hey, do you have a smartphone? You know, one of those fancy phones that takes pictures or videos? Oh, you do have a smartphone. Oh, your grandson has been calling you with one of those fancy video calls. Well, you know, if you can do that fancy video call with your grandson, I can do that fancy video call with you too. You know, you said you've been missing that face-to-face contact, and I know we can't be having you in the office right now. Why don't we give it a try? And things of that nature, and kind of gently building the bridge in that fashion. Starting with just a gentle outreach call. Well, we can schedule a phone follow-up and building from there. That's what I've been doing. And it seems to have worked pretty well for a lot of the people that I've been doing, just kind of starting and kind of laying the groundwork in that fashion. Is that something that you've tried, Leslie? Has that been helpful to you?
Yeah, we have. Some of our clinicians are running into the problem of the patient is really happy with that check-in phone call, and
Okay.
that kind of satisfies their need, and they don't want to move to the next level.
Okay.
But unfortunately, in private practice, we can't have all our clinicians just making check-in phone calls to everybody.
Yeah, you're right. In private practice, you guys do have, you know, kind of a limited time, and
Right.
you know, that you need billable hours.
Yeah, I did have one client who kind of let it slip during a check-in phone call that she was doing telehealth with her primary care doctor.
Okay.
After she told me she really didn't have the capability to do it.
Oh, what?
And
Okay.
thankfully we have a good relationship. So I was able to say, oh, you do have the capability to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we actually did do some telehealth, but
okay.
I think it's just some anxiety people have about it.
Okay. So some of the things
Kelly, do you give your people a choice of what format they want to do telehealth?
Absolutely. I say, you know, I start with, would you prefer a video or a phone session? And I know in private practice for reimbursement rates, that's really different for you guys. At VA, I do have the luxury of not having to worry about those reimbursement rates. And you guys in private practice, that's been a bone of contention. So I hope that, you know, Medicare and other agencies are going to take a hard look at that, and there's going to be some big changes soon. I do give them the option. I have lately been trying to gently push that if they do have, you know, a smartphone or a computer that has video capability, I personally think that I and they get a lot more out of a video session.
Mhm.
You know, I love to see the nonverbals. I like to see their face.
Yeah.
I like to see, I can even get a little bit about their personal hygiene out of a
Sure.
video session. There's
Right.
no way I'm getting that out of a phone call. You know, and it's funny, I've even gotten to see a little bit about their house. You know, you guys can see my home right now. You guys can see my office. And, you know, on a video session that I had last week, a veteran, even, you know, I could see a few things piled up on his couch behind him. And he said, yeah, I'm just letting everything literally pile up. And he motioned to his couch behind him. He's like, I just haven't been cleaning, and that's not like me. Again, I work for VA, and a lot of men bring their military habits with them for a lifetime, that the way they made their bed in the Army is the way they're going to make their bed for the rest of their life. And so for some of them, not cleaning is a big deal. Not all of them, but for some of them. And this is one of those men that the way he made his bed in the Army is, you know, at 75, the way he continues to make his bed. And so for him, literally having things that were kind of piled on the couch, and I was like, okay, let's talk about that. What's going on? And, you know, it was kind of a depression fog rolling in that he just didn't feel like doing things. I would have never gotten that out of a phone call. So when I'm able, I do kind of gently push, well, do you have that capability? Okay, let's talk about that. And if it's a discomfort with using the technology, Okay, well, how can I help you with that? Let's talk about how to set this up. And so if you're able to help them set up whatever platform for telehealth you're using, if that's Doxy, if that's Cisco, if that's Zoom, what have you, here I can help you with that. And even building additional time into your sessions of, here, let's take 5 minutes to set that up. That might be the hurdle that you have to overcome, that they don't want to verbalize. I'm uncomfortable setting that up on my phone, computer, what have you.
Something we've done, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. I'm blessed to have a secretary, and there's 4 of us. And so my secretary has been able to call everyone up a day ahead of time, give very specific directions, and say, Crystal would really like to, or Dr. Oswald would really like to talk to you. She wants you to give it a try, because they do feel victorious when they do it. Definitely.
Yes.
So that's what we've done, and that has worked beautifully for most people. And it also keeps it more professional, that as the therapist, you're not setting up the clerical part and you get right to the session. So there's not this fumbling around of technology that can take 10 minutes sometimes for people to get hooked up. And if they don't, then I just switch to the phone. But I found that they really want to try it if they're given a little bit of encouragement.
Sure. Well, and Crystal, you highlighted something else, that they feel victorious. So on the back end of that, one of the things that I like to spend a lot of time with is, if this is something 100% new for them that they've never ever done before, you know, kind of celebrating that victory, that they've learned something new, that they've acquired a new skill, that oftentimes they do want to show something else, like, I'm going to show my wife that I did this, you know, and really praising that, and, you know, making sure that they embrace that. And I recently had a veteran that we did a VA Video Connect visit, which is similar to Zoom. You get an email, and then you click on the link in the email and you open the platform. And as we were talking about it, he's like, is this like the Zoom that everybody is talking about? And I said, well, yes, this is very similar to Zoom. And he's like, well, I want to Zoom with my friends. How do I Zoom? And so, you know, I told him, this is very similar to Zoom. This is how you Zoom. And he's like, I'm going to set up a Zoom with my card club. And so he felt so empowered that he could master this, that he was going to teach all of his friends to Zoom. And, you know, so really it kind of created the sense of mastery. And so that kind of helped him overcome in the moment, and then, you know, created another bridge that he was feeling isolated, and all of a sudden, oh, I'm going to do this new thing. So, you know, Crystal, you captured another important element. Let's celebrate your victory. So that becomes a nice therapeutic piece as well.
For my work, I tend to work, at least more recently, have worked with our dementia care coordination team. So the folks I'm working with, the actual veteran, the actual patient, I need to bring in caregivers. So that's been one other way that I've been able to get telehealth and televideo capability, because the caregiver is able to navigate that a little bit better, whether that's the spouse even, or whether that's a child or caregiver. And so that's been helpful too. But I think the other piece of it is, for some folks, just calling attention to it when we finally get into the virtual meeting room, just like, this is an interesting experience, and kind of, you know, addressing the elephant in the room too, to help kind of ease some of the discomfort, and to give them the space to talk about what some of their hesitations might have been, or what they're feeling in that moment.
I know for me, it's, these kinds of things are not intuitive for me, and so I have to do it 3 or 4 or 5 times, and then I have to do it again 3 or 4 or 5 times before I get it down. And so it begets a lot of frustration. And sometimes, you know, when you're trying to connect with somebody on a platform, and they have to download something, or they have to do this, and you're not there to see what their screen looks like, and they can't do it, you know, and so you try this and you try that. And so I told my office manager, if I had a baseball bat, there would be no computers left in our office, you know, because of the frustration that it generates in me and anxiety too. So I have to really work at this so that it's a pleasant experience for me and for them. Because if it's not a pleasant experience for me, it's certainly not going to be for them.
And it does. It's something that takes a lot of practice and really knowing your platform well to be able to troubleshoot on the other person's end as well as your own. You're right. It takes a lot of practice to get used to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Who else has questions? What are some other questions you guys have?
I just want to say my experience has been that when COVID-19 first became in the public awareness, a lot of my older adults and younger adults canceled their appointments because of COVID-19, and we're very happy to hear that we were offering telehealth services. And so they were willing and they were able. I have some that do have Doxy.me capacities, and others that just don't have the technology. And so with them, it's like the people that I have maybe only seen once or twice, I've had to spend kind of more time on the phone with them, getting them comfortable seeing me, talking to me on the phone rather than seeing me face to face. And I had to do that more with new patients rather than people I'd seen for a while. Somebody mentioned about hearing problems, you know, over the phone with hearing problems, that can be difficult. So I've had to, you know, you want to have a therapeutic or a supportive voice, but sometimes you have to speak more clearly, you know, more concisely so that they can hear. So kind of like having to temper that. But I think that when I've taken a little bit of time with them to explain telehealth, explain what the process is going to be like, they're a little bit more comfortable with it, and they're a little bit more willing to engage. You know what I mean? But it seems like it's a different kind of relationship with the phone, and I made sure that I gave them the option of strictly telephone if they didn't have the technology. You know what I mean? And a lot of them wanted to do that, didn't want to be without therapy altogether. So it's kind of like a brave new world, and kind of finding like a telephone or a virtual relationship with the patients. I mean, it is different than face to face.
Yep, it definitely is a different relationship. And so we have to be creative, especially when we are on the phone. How do we bridge that gap of not having the nonverbals and still making sure that we're connecting in a warm, empathic way that the patient is feeling heard, that the patient is feeling understood. But you bring up a good point that sometimes sensory deficits are an issue. And so related to that, sometimes we do have to be a little bit selective with who's a good candidate for telehealth. Brittany, why don't you speak to that a little bit further? What are some of the things that you think about when you're selecting the best candidates for telehealth?
Sure. I kind of think in a couple different veins there, because again, when I'm working with our more severely folks with more severe dementia, we're actually doing a lot more kind of caregiver work and involving the caregiver, and it's a lot more managing kind of acute needs. And we can do some assessments like mental status. I think that was a question, but there are limitations, so making sure that you're documenting well. But then when I'm working with kind of the veteran himself and they're capable enough to kind of be engaging in sessions, I mean, I'm looking for folks that are at least willing to try it. I don't think, you know, not having previous experience with it, you know, we can talk about those barriers or those hesitations. I'm looking for folks that can more or less engage with the modality in a way that's going to be productive. So, you know, if someone's got significant hearing difficulties and there's no way to even video connect, even where, you know, there can be some mouth reading to some extent, because even then there's kind of lag times and it's not totally trusted. I mean, I'm looking for folks that can, it would be very, I haven't met one that's been able to have the technology hookup that translates, you know, like that transcribes what I'm speaking. So that's just going to be very rare. but at the same time, I still want to deliver services. So I might alter my session in a way that is focused on like, what's the bare bones? What are the acute needs assessments? You know, keep things slow, speak loud, speak clearly. So I might alter in a way. But I'm also, you know, looking for folks that, you know, an acute need is not going to preclude them from participating in the modality. We're still able to see folks if it's an emergency situation or if that is what safety dictates. So if someone is more or less stable and can remain stable, and you know from these check-ins and can engage with the modality, and there's kind of comfortability there, then from a safety, from an ongoing kind of risk assessment perspective, that's someone that might be a better candidate, that's someone that we need eyes on more regularly, or might be doing more frequent check-ins depending on kind of the clinical need.
Yeah, so Brittany covered the vast majority of the highlights. If someone has severe sensory deficits, obviously, you'd either need a caregiver to be present to help involve the patient, or find some other workaround in that fashion. If they do have handicap assistive devices, that's wonderful, but if not, and then certain very severe pathologies, you know, depending on safety, you might need that person to be in the office. The only other considerations that I look for are really, you know, severe psychosis. And again, that's hearkening back to the mental status thing, you know, some of those very obvious questions. Do you think the TV is talking to you? Well, if you think the TV is talking to you, it's probably a bad idea to have a video visit where in fact the screen is talking to you. That's going to be very disorienting for the patient. So knowing some of those things ahead of time can help you screen those things out. Okay, so we had a question in the chat box from Elizabeth. Options for getting the informed consent when involving the caregiver, whether patient is at home or facility. The caregivers may change from day to day. So Elizabeth, I'm assuming this is a situation where the patient has capacity and can sign for themselves that they don't have a guardian. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes,
so,
although I'm really at my wit's end on how to, unless I do it by mail, other than a verbal informed consent just for them. But when you start adding people and doing what's been called a dynamic informed consent, which is a new word for me in one of the trainings that I took, it seems like that's really difficult to keep adding things, adding people. And yeah, I can talk to your son, I can talk to your daughter. No, I can't talk, you know, your daughter-in-law's in the room, so you told me not to talk when she's there. It's really getting it's the complexity grows.
Of course, yeah. So what a lot of people have been doing, because informed consent right now is dicey, because of course we want to be moving forward. We don't want to be delaying care, but of course, how long is snail mail going to take? So what a lot of people have been doing in this situation is getting that verbal informed consent, proceeding with treatment, and documenting heavily that the informed consent is then in the mail. Get it in the mail as soon as you can. Tell them to get it back to you as soon as you can, and document heavily. That's what a lot of people have been doing in this situation. And then of course, document. So as quickly as you can be getting that informed consent. The physical, if you do have a patient that is reasonably techie and can scan and email things back and forth, of course, that's a pretty quick and easy way to do it. I've heard about people who have even been having their patients, you know, email you the PDF of the form, they print it out, they sign it, they snapshot it with their phone and email it back. That's a quick and easy way to do it.
The thing is, before you can get to that, you have to
get the verbal,
get the release from HIPAA obligations, because those are not HIPAA compliant methodologies. And so people can, I don't know if the right word is waive, they can waive, but we'll use it for now. They can waive their right to HIPAA compliant security around their personal information, but they have to understand all the different ways that that can come to haunt them, which with some of our older people can gradually, you can start getting on that slope of competency. And you know, they're all, a lot of them are, you know, they leave $100 in their mailbox for their Girl Scout cookies, or you know.
Well, and right now we are in the midst of a pandemic, so we do have the governor's waiver in place right now for communications that are outside normal channels. So that's why we are allowed to be using Zoom and FaceTime and Google Duo for telehealth and things of that nature. So that those fall within the bounds of the waiver. Ordinarily, you're right. We would be getting a normal informed consent signed in the office before proceeding with a telehealth relationship. That would be the normal channels that we'd all be proceeding with. This is well outside normal channels that we're in the midst of a pandemic. So that's why people are doing a lot of those things. Jerome?
Yes. Okay. So Kelly, can the informed consent for telehealth be folded into your usual consent when you provide services? Can
A
they
lot
be,
of people, yeah, a lot of
I don't
people
see
are.
I don't see why it's necessary to have a separate informed consent for video.
If it's already included. So one of the luxuries we have at VA, when we start out with treating a veteran at VA, it's included in our informed consent for treatment. So when a veteran signs up at VA, they sign 1 million forms. Telehealth is one of them. So we started that a long time ago. And a lot of people are now including that in their private practices. They're folding those forms in now.
I'm thinking what I'm thinking of is not necessarily folding the forms into the packet of forms. I'm thinking having one consent form, you know, to your treatment as you would ordinarily, you know, in terms of the patient's rights and all that stuff. And then couldn't the conditions or the clauses regarding telehealth be put into that too? I was thinking that would be a lot more simple.
I don't see why not. I would recommend using the language in the form that OPA has on their website, since we know that that's been you know, well reviewed and kind of legal.
That's the one from Jared Skillings.
Michael, could you speak to that? I don't know who the form was reviewed by. Yeah. Michael would know more about that.
Yeah, I think it is. I have it here, and I looked at it earlier today.
Michael, you were muted. Is that the form that was reviewed?
Yes.
Okay. So that is the, you know, the language that I would recommend that you would use. That way also you don't have to reinvent the wheel. OPA has already done that for you, and it's available on the website. So if you would like to use their language, it's available for you. You know, that's A-OK wording. And if you would like to fold that into your consent or just include that as another form, that would be, I would think that would be the easiest way, but whatever works for your practice, it's your practice.
I think
if I may,
there's some nice software too that can email the client through a HIPAA compliant email system the paperwork for them to do an electronic signature.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of I think it's Google Suite that that can do that. I'm not sure what some of the other ones are, but there are a lot of HIPAA compliant emails that are coming out and about. Everyone's different.
One that I have subscribed to is called Hushmail, which was recommended by Person-Centered Tech, which is one of the other training places, training organizations. And if you do want it and you mention Person-Centered Tech, you get a lifetime discount. So it's not super expensive, but what I'm finding is encrypted email, which is what you are supposed to start out with, according to both Marlene Mayhew and Roy Higgins, who's the other one, is it goes to people's spam, and it gets really kind of, until you've done it, it's confusing. You don't create a PIN, so that's easy. You put in a passphrase, like, Hark the Herald Angel Sings or something like that, and you keep, they do it, and they can keep using it. It then disappears in 2 weeks. But these trainings are really anxiety producing. They're so, you got to do it this way, you got to do it this way. If you have regular email on your Psychology Today website, which I don't, get that off right away. That's not HIPAA compliant. It's really scary. It's almost like scary. It's like being taught to drive by somebody that just had an accident, So it's really inhibited me because, naturally I want to do things the right way, but then it's like many layers. But I think Hushmail is, Hushmail, I would encourage you to look at their website, and they have a lot of training stuff on there too that's free. Sorry about that.
Yeah, our clients don't like our encrypted email either. It's not easy to open as it is to open just a regular email. But the electronic signature software, they don't mind at all because that is easy to open.
That's something different, the electronic signature software. Okay.
Yeah, so if you've gotten anything from, I don't know, an accountant or a lawyer from DocuSign to sign for yourself, it's a similar kind of thing. I mean, DocuSign is pretty cost prohibitive probably for a lot of us, but there's one called HelloSign, there's one called eSign Genie, and those are more affordable for private practice.
Okay. HelloSign, eSign Genie. Okay.
I'm sure there's others too. But our clients have been happy with that. They don't like our encrypted email, but they're happy with that. So it must be a little bit easier for them on their end.
So Leslie,
And that way we can get the ROIs.
How does it work? Let's say you want to get a consent form signed. How does it work?
So on our end, we've uploaded our consent form and our releases of information to this web-based software program. And then from the software program, we put in the client's email. And that software program sends the client an email that they click on and then are prompted to sign our document. And they don't have to send anything back to us. It automatically gets sent back to us.
It goes into their registration page or their client data.
Right. Depending on how you have it set up. Yep.
I see.
But they don't have to download anything or save anything or anything like that.
That's called Google Sign. What is that called?
There's a couple. We use eSign Genie, but there's also HelloSign and DocuSign. We liked it so well that we might start using it with all our clients, even not our telehealth clients, to give them their paperwork ahead of time.
I know from my point of view, it works best for me. We provide services in long-term care settings. It works best for me to have a confederate there on site, maybe the social worker or an activity coordinator, who a couple days before, I give them my schedule of patients that I want to see, and I get the email address from the computer, whoever's going to open it up, and they are in the room ferrying this the devices from one patient to the next, and that works pretty well, except when they leave the room and they lose the connection, or they leave the room and the TV is on, or they leave the room and the door is open. It's so many things are beyond your control. And if you develop these relationships with these folks and you have to educate them about how to set it up and stick around just for a little bit so we make sure we have a good connection and all that, that works best. And I think the results are optimal for me like that. And some, I was really surprised to see how many people were willing to help. The social workers particularly, because I felt like I was being a pain in the rear end by asking them to do all these things for us. And, we're the ones getting the pay, but they were, I was pleased to see how helpful they were. And that was encouraging to me.
Jerome, I'm pleased that's been your experience. I know that's not been everyone's experience in nursing home settings, so I'm thrilled that's been your experience.
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of rapport you have with the folks who work there.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're getting a little low on time. We've got maybe just a little bit more than 15 minutes left. Let's take some other questions. Who else has a question?
Can you talk about doing a mental status exam via telehealth?
Absolutely. Yeah. So mental status can be a little bit picky. Are there certain elements of the mental status that that you're looking for specifically? Anything I can really drill into?
I like being able to do the clock drawing test with people, but I've never done it via telehealth.
Okay. So obviously that is way easier. That is way easier over video. That's one that I'll actually go ahead and I'll do with people, that I will, be like, okay, let's get a piece of paper. Go ahead and draw the face of a clock for me. Put in all the numbers and make the time 10 past 11. So that's something that don't hesitate to do. Tell them to, do you have a piece of paper nearby? Do you have a pencil? Go ahead, draw. Hold it up to the camera so I can see it. That's one that I've done very frequently. Is anybody doing MOCAs right now? MOCAs are a pretty popular one.
The MOCA blind is the MOCA blind does not require any kinds of drawings or anything like that, and you still come up with a number.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
what I was showing you.
Yeah, Brittany, do you want to tell them a little bit more about doing even some MOCA over the phone, or a little bit of assessment there?
Yeah, so actually the MOCA organization sent out some adjusted instructions to give the MOCA from a telehealth platform. There's of course limitations. So even with the blind, let's say you're trying to give the blind MOCA over the phone, there's still an element of, hey, we're going to use the honor system here. No paper pencil when I asked for the serial, the serial 7s, or no, without looking, what's today's date? So I think that the big thing though is that you get a ballpark, but you want to make sure you're documenting that. Like obvious limitations with assessment based on modality. You shouldn't be diagnosing from a MOCA anyway, but certainly just making clear if other providers are reading your documentation that they know that there are limitations and some cautions in those interpretations and the conclusions that they can draw. One of the items on the MOCA is the serial letters, where every time you say the letter A, they tap their hand. Well, I can't see them tap their hand if I'm on the phone per se. And so depending on if they have hands free or if they can put things on speaker, I might ask them to clap. And then I've had some that couldn't. They just had like no way of being able to make an audible, quick, staccato noise for me to, and I had to omit that question. So you're using your clinical judgment and then making interpretations.
For the finger tap, I've had them tap a button on the phone.
There you go.
Yeah, so I literally, especially if people have kind of older fashioned phones, I actually have them tap a number on the phone if they can't figure out a clap.
That's a good idea, right? And then you'll get something audible. I like that. So you can look up those recommendations from MOCA. They have the abbreviated, adapted instructions. A couple things I like to make sure and clear of when I'm having to do it over video, and they can get their own utensils, and I am trying to use some of those visual and kind of written parts of the exam. is I try to ask them to get a blank piece of paper, like a printer paper, something without lines or grids. That's something I would do anyway, like, you know, in an exam, but just you have a piece of printer paper laying around, and that's the best, like, you know, if all they can do is line paper, you're making the best you can do with the circumstances you have, and just making sure you're documenting it.
Yeah, and so some of the other challenges that we run into, you're right that sometimes we have to be a lot more overt, especially over the phone. Some of the things that we don't really want to ask those really blunt questions about. And so what we might want to do is we might want to, you know, maybe even prep them that, hey, I have to ask some uncomfortable questions, but, you know, because this is an odd time, I have to, you know, I'm asking everyone these questions. Let me ask you some uncomfortable questions, and then go ahead and ask, you know, these questions that might be a little bit weird. Or, you know, Mr. So-and-so, would it be okay if we included your wife in the conversation? Can I speak to your wife? And, you know, ask, you know, have you noticed any of these behaviors or any of these things, and including a family member? Because a lot of times they'll tell me, you know, oh yes, I'm taking all of my medication. I'm taking it perfectly. And I'm noticing something is really, okay, this isn't right. And, you know, well, can I check in with Mrs. So-and-so? You know, is your wife around? Would that be okay? And of course, always gaining their consent. But, you know, get Mrs. So-and-so on the phone, and, oh yes, Harold hasn't taken his medication in weeks. I'm just at my wit's end. And it's okay, can you put Mr. So-and-so back on the phone? Let's talk about this. Let's game plan together. And sometimes, of course, with their consent, getting a little bit of collateral information, especially when things seem really shifted. That's another thing that, especially if I do know the veteran's family, you know, for a lot of our patients, it's very common, again, at least for my work, because I work embedded in medical teams, that often I do know, you know, spouses, sons, daughters, sometimes I know grandchildren's aunties, uncles, their best friend Larry, sometimes even their dogs, whether they're service dogs or not. You know, we know everybody. So it's very common for them to include family. So it's not weird for me to be asking, hey, would you mind if I? And so sometimes if I need to know more about mental status stuff, I might get their permission to include family member in the conversation as well. That's a workaround I sometimes use.
That's been helpful across the board, Kelly, because I think this touches on some of the comments from our participants. Informed consent to me is just ongoing and dynamic. So I'm always trying to preface what we're about to do. I'm trying to kind of give etiquette as we go to, like, here's what to expect when we set up our video appointment, or do you have a private safe space that you can have for that appointment? Okay, great. You know, so priming ahead of time the kinds of things that they might need or expect. And then as we go through it, like, again, here's our purpose of our visit today, and here's what the kinds of questions I'm going to be asking you, and just always kind of priming what I'm going to be doing along the way to help kind of ease some of those. I think it helps with etiquette. It helps with the professionalism, whether it's on the phone or video. And I think it also just helps ease some anxieties too about what to expect for folks.
I think too, just to add into that briefly, that thinking about it as a dynamic consent takes off the pressure of us a little bit, because someone mentioned it is a lot to keep track of. It is a lot to, like, add to what we were already doing. And so if it's like an ongoing client or patient, you know, what I didn't remember to tell them that if the connection is bad, I will call them back. They don't have to call me, because then it'll be busy. Those kinds of things that it's okay to continue adding along, as long as we get, like, the basics of the consent in place, just to lift some of the anxiety that would be from our end.
Sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love that, you know, you're looking at this as taking a little bit of the burden off of you, because you're right. A lot of times, you know, maybe we'll forget to cover it all at the beginning of session. You know, don't be afraid to bring it up later. Or, you know, if you're going back and writing your note and saying, oh my gosh, I forgot to do that, don't lose your mind. you know, just maybe make an extra note that, you know what, I need to cover that next time, or I need to call them back and review that thing. There is just a lot to cover in telehealth, you know, and so what I've talked to some people that they're doing, and I really love this, is that they're even coming up with a checklist of things to do at the beginning. And when I started out in telehealth, you know, I physically had a checklist of the things that I needed to start with, you know, because the informed consent looks a little bit different. It's not my standard informed consent. So I had the new informed consent written out at the top of a piece of paper because it wasn't my standard. You know, my standard I could rattle off in my sleep. So when I was learning telehealth, I had the new one written out. And then next, you know, confirming that they're in a private place, because I didn't know that, you know, they're not in my office. I can't guarantee that. So remembering to ask that question, asking about their environment. Also confirming that they're at home, you know, that we take telehealth so much more seriously than they do. We've had patients in some of the strangest places that you can imagine. You know, I did a session with one of my veterans. He was in his bathroom today, and that wasn't the strangest thing about, you know, my telehealth sessions, but it was a place where he could find some privacy today. And that was a-okay with me, that he was literally sitting on the toilet for the entire session. I'm just gonna hope to God that he was completely close, but you know, it's where he could find privacy today. And so, you know, that's okay. He was at home. So, you know, he had voiced suicidal ideation. I could get the cops there. So, you know, that's not the weirdest place I've done a telehealth session, but, you know, I confirmed where he was. If he had said, you know, Kelly, I'm feeling super suicidal today, you know, that I could get emergency services to his house. Or if you
Kelly, is this a per session checklist or just an overall per client checklist? Is it per session checklist?
Per session, I confirm where they are.
Sure.
And if I'm doing phone, I have a couple of extra things. I do a couple of identifiers. At the VA, we use the last 4 of their social and the date of birth, just to make sure that I'm not talking to someone who just sounds a lot like them. So I don't accidentally disclose information when I've dialed the wrong phone number. So those are some extra things. And then always when I'm doing telehealth, whether it's the most benign patient in the world who I'm just doing something like tobacco cessation with, I still check about suicidality. So
Do you check with an emergency number every time?
So it's a little bit different for us at VA. In our telehealth platform, we have an electronic 911 system built in that basically I can call a separate number and get 911 to their house. That's not true of every platform. So for you, if I were practicing out of a private practice, I'd have a backup phone number and I'd confirm what municipality they're in. Because let's say, you know, if they're saying they're in Cleveland, Ohio, maybe they're actually in Cleveland Heights, you know, to confirm, frankly, what emergency services are going to respond. Because even if the patient's not, say, suicidal, that you have to get those emergency services there, what if they have a stroke? What if they have a seizure? Anything could happen. They're not physically in your office, so you've always got to be able to get emergency services to them. So, you know, there are some extra layers of protection that you need to have when they're not physically there, that we can control the environment. So there are some extra layers that you do need to add, and that I do confirm every session.
I actually have that ready to go so that it's less clunky. It just kind of, it's a nice smooth opening. Like, let's just confirm where you're, you know, where you're at right now. And they rattle off their address. I already have their address right in front of me, like ready to go. And what's the best number to reach you if we get disconnected? Again, I already have that right there, but I'm making sure they can kind of repeat it back to me. I kind of prep the session, so to speak, so that it's nice and the information is there, it flows smoothly. And it's a reminder to me that, you know, my checklist, like what are the things I need to be asking for at the beginning of every session.
And people who have been working with me for a while, especially now that I'm doing pretty much all telehealth, by now they're used to it. As soon as, you know, the people who I'm only doing phone with, as soon as they pick up the phone and they do it's me, they're like, "Hi, Dr. Martinson. This is Joe Smith. Last four, 9988, date of birth, January 1st, 1972, you know," and like, they just know because, you know, they know that I always do it. And they're like, "I'm at home, I'm in my bedroom," you know, and so they get really used to it. And, you know, some even make jokes and they're like, "One of these days I'm going to tell you I'm on Mars," you know. And I was like, "Well, I definitely can't get you emergency services on Mars," you know. So some of them get really playful about it, and it becomes part of our rapport. So they get really used to it. They're totally fine with it. It's one of the ways that I introduce it is this is part of our privacy. This is one of the ways I protect your privacy to make sure I'm talking to the right person. This is one of the ways I protect your safety. Okay.
We did find that we had to explain to people why we were collecting the information on their local emergency services, because a couple people actually thought that we were going to provide a list of mental health patients to the local emergency services.
Sure.
Yeah. So we explained, no, it's in case something happens, we need to know which is the local place to call for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's a common thing. You know, because we have a lot of people who have the exact same concerns because there are a lot of myths out there that, you know, within the veteran community, oh, is this going to go on a list so I can't buy a gun and things like that.
Right.
So dispelling those myths and saying, no, this is for your safety. You know, God forbid anything should happen to you. I want to make sure you're safe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've got exactly 2 minutes. Any other kind of last minute questions, concerns, quick queries, or thoughts to share with our group this evening? Okay, well, I just want to say what a pleasure it's been speaking with everyone. You know, I hope we covered at least a little bit of what you all were looking for. We will be having some future seminars of this nature, or consultation groups, I should say. You know, there will be another geropsychology specific one coming up, held by some of our wonderful colleagues in just a little while. So be watching for future announcements on that. And we'll be holding consultation groups of this style intermittently. But again, my name is Kelly Martinson. Feel free to reach out to me or any of my colleagues with the CTC or anything of that nature for any questions that you might have. We're really here to help. All right.
What is your email address, Kelly?
Here, I'll type it in the chat box. It's kellymartinson@gmail.com.
Uh-huh.
Okay, did I type that right? It would be embarrassing to spell my name wrong. Yeah, just kellymartinson@gmail.com. KELLYMARTINCIN@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out. We're all here to help in any way that we can, because really we're all in this together. Nobody has all the answers. If I don't have the answer, I'm happy to ask around and do some of the research to help find it for you.
It
Thank
was
you
a
very much.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you. This
you.
was very
Thank
helpful.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you have
very
any
much.
feedback,
Yes.
things that we can do better to improve the experience for you, please do let us know, because we're always looking to make these better for the future. Please do email me, okay? All right.
Thank you. Nice
Thanks
to
so
see
much,
everyone.
Have a great
Yeah, it is
Bye.
nice to see
Stay
everyone.
healthy.
It's nice to have the video. It gives you a sense of community.
it does.
So,
Yeah.
Have a
Bye.
great evening, everyone. Thanks so much.
thank you so much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.